Welcome. Welcome to another episode of The Impact of AI, sponsored by AI Time Journal. Each week, we explore how AI and cognitive technologies impact us both professionally and personally. For those of you whom I've not met, my name is Melissa Drew, and I will be your host for this week's podcast. This week, this is exciting, guys, because we're going to talk about trash and recycling. I spoke to Amanda Mars. She is here with us today. She is the Senior Director of Product for AMP Robotics. We are going to learn a lot about trash and a lot about recycling and why that is exciting, because it is. But more importantly, why this is going to impact us again, the podcast, impact us daily, both professionally and personally. Now, I'd like to say quickly, because I was on the website, that AMP Robotics is a combination of meeting the essential needs that we have today for recycling. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but we're going to get into that. More specifically, AMP Robotics has developed a combination of artificial intelligence, machine learning, computer vision, a whole bunch of other things that are going to enable a robotic sorting of materials as small as what type of plastic, but at a pick rate of more than 80 items per minute, which is more than twice as fast as a human could physically sort it. And additionally, with greater accuracy and consistency. So this is our topic for the day. Absolutely going to be exciting. Welcome, Amanda.
Hey, thanks for having me. You ready to talk about trash?
I am. One of the questions that we always ask everybody is nobody's journey is ever direct anymore. And what's noting is, I think everybody knows now, I went to your LinkedIn page. So what's of note is you got a degree in aerospace engineering, which is quite interesting, specifically researching space lab, space systems design. And then from there, you went into management science and engineering, focusing on energy systems. And I really want to understand how you started out with that part of your career and then shifted into risk and then working for a consulting firm until finally you landed at AMP Robotics.
Yeah, what a great question. So I think from a very early age, I knew I wanted to work in something that it's technology, but I don't think I really understood what technology was when I was really young, but something where we can change the way that we work in some sort of way that helps the world, whatever that small way that each of us can contribute is. I was told throughout high school, hey, you're good at math and science, you should be an engineer. And I never really thought, what does an engineer do? What does that mean? I had an interest in airplanes, flew and was working on my private pilot's license throughout high school. So wow. I thought, okay, let's just go do aerospace engineering. That sounds fun. Maybe that was a little bit inspired by seeing a space shuttle launch when I was 6. Yeah. So that was a feel-good moment that stuck with me about just the power of engineered systems and what they do and change for the world. So as I was an aerospace engineer, I realized pretty quickly that I wanted a more immediate impact from the work that I do. Sometimes in the aerospace world, you can work your entire career on one little component and not see your product fly. So I figured, okay, yeah, this is interesting, but I think I want something a little bit more tangible for impact in my lifetime. And that's when I decided to go back to grad school and study management science and engineering with a focus on energy systems. And that led me to GE to work in their smart grid.
Oh, wow. Wow. So smart grid is the utility, the big power systems that we integrate. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. She's shaking her head. Yes. For those of you listening via audio. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So smart grid is all of the connected transmission distribution systems, and how do we make it so they can be fault tolerant, things can shut off and keep as much of the grid alive as possible. How do you help with demand generation constraints and things like participant programs from consumers? If it's a super hot day in Arizona in the summer, you can turn down your air conditioning or cycle your fridge or things like that, so you're not having to build more capacity for power plants. So it's pretty broad, pretty interesting, and I really enjoyed working in that space.
And that's something that's still relevant today, even outside the US, and probably more outside the US. Yeah,
absolutely.
And California.
Absolutely.
But from there, so you're not done yet in your career
not
journey.
Done yet.
From there.
Yeah, so I was at GE for about 6 years, and I'm really grateful for my time there. It was such a career accelerator, and I had so many learnings. I was in GE is very good at training programs. So I was in a training program that intentionally took me through different functional areas so I could gain enough of the knowledge of each functional area to learn how to put it all together into a product line. And that was really the beginning of product management for me. So I had a rotation in service, in supply chain, and marketing, and in technology. And those four put together are most, not all, but most of a P&L. And so when I was towards the end of my time at GE, Amazon reached out. And it just started getting me really curious. What does it take to build and develop products at the speed and scale of a big tech company? How is that different than an industrial company? But at my core, I knew I really liked those industrial products. I think that's just super interesting where hardware, software, and people come together to create an outcome. And that's really what inspires me. And so when AMP reached out, it was a no-brainer to get back into an industrial space. And if you look at our technology, it's exactly that. It's hardware, software, and people coming together for an outcome.
So everything in your journey was just, you're on this path, and everything you did was just adding another skill set and adding another skill set, which ultimately is why this connection with you and AMP Robotics works perfectly.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And AMP, the other part of the no-brainer decision to join AMP, besides the fit with my interest and my skill set and the growth of my own career, it's really great group of people. Really great group of people. We have some brilliant, passionate people on the team, and it's just a pleasure every day to work with them.
Which then brings us to our follow-on question. So what do you do today at AMP Robotics?
Yeah, so AMP, the company, is on a mission to modernize the world's recycling infrastructure. We apply AI and robotic automation to increase recycling rates. Some of the numbers, depending on where you live, it can be as low as a 15% recyclable rate. So even though you might be putting those recyclables in the bin, they don't always get sorted out. And so it's just not economically viable to recover all of the recyclables and reclaim them into raw materials. So it's all part of the global supply chain. We have these commodity items. We just have to be able to extract them from the waste stream and then pull them out so they can get reclaimed. So our technology recovers recyclables from municipal collection, electronic scrap, and construction and demolition. Yeah, so the AI and the robotics technology, it's really going after the central challenges of recycling to lower the cost of sortation and shift the economics of the industry. So there's kind of two levers to how all this comes out. You're lowering the cost per pick. So when you talk about 80 picks per minute, that's really important that your cost per pick is low. But we're also able with the AI technology to see a detail to the product that previously you couldn't see. So now you can start to create bales of commodities that are more pure. That's the industry term we talk about for commodities of a like type together. And that can lead to a higher revenue. So you get these two effects where your cost is getting lower, your revenue can get higher. That fundamentally shifts the economics of this industry. And so my role at AMP as Senior Director of Product is to lead the product function and identify all of the areas where we can build technology that rapidly scales our business, ensures that we're focused on growth, but ultimately ensures that we're giving the right things to our customers so they get this output of the increased economics.
You mentioned municipality. So is that what's impacting me? So when I wanted to clarify that. So if I'm, because I get construction, I get some of the electrical components, but then for me listening to this, what you're doing is directly impacting me. And one of the ways I saw that was over the course of years, because your technology, you apply that technology to any of these sorting facilities, right? So you're not the actual sorting facilitator, you're the one that applies, you give them the technology to do this. Okay.
That's right. Yeah, these customers are called Municipal Recovery Facilities, or MRFs in the language of the industry. And so they're running the curbside collection programs. They're bringing all of that material into a centralized location, and then they're running that material through a series of sortations to try to separate things like the cardboard into one area that tend to be larger size material, your fiber, so all of your paper, your newspaper, and then your containers, and then additional separation within the containers. So you'll get your plastics divided by type of plastic, beverage cans, so all of your aluminum cans, which, note to our listeners, please always recycle your plastics in your aluminum cans.
What about glass? Because
Yeah.
I'm sitting here thinking, we talked about, I mentioned in the intro that this is using computer vision, and I was fortunate enough to see a video on the website. So if you guys need to go to amprobotics.com website, there's a 2-minute video that shows how this works. I didn't see any glass. And my question to you, is that because of the technology? Glass is no? Okay.
No, we can see glass,
Oh.
even glass by color. It tends to, in the way that these facilities are set up, the glass tends to come out earlier. It tends to get crushed, and it tends to be smaller pieces. And so that'll go into things like road debris. So there's just different uses for it. And it really depends on where you are for what market exists for commodities.
Okay.
So yeah, it just kind of all depends. But we want our technology to be able to support as many customers and as many materials as possible.
So I'm going to tie this back in one more time to the audience, and then we'll go back and really deep dive into the technology. So a couple years ago, it was required by my municipality that I had to sort all of my stuff. And through the introduction of technology such as yourself, we got notifications saying, hey, you guys don't have to do this anymore. In fact, they're going to market it and call it zero sort, or the idea was that we're just going to give you a can now. You just throw everything in there because we can automate the sorting, no big deal. So I want to just connect the dots that, as we talk about how do we personally get impacted with this is a perfect example of a technology that's been layered into your municipality and how they're turning around and driving that. Sometimes it's cost savings, but sometimes it's just making it easier as something as simple as I now don't have to sort it because the facility does it for me.
That's right. And then recycling rates go up when you make it easier for the consumer. Just put everything in one bin. We call that single stream, and we'll be able to sort it out from there.
Yeah. So if we shift now to your role, I understand, is you support the technology roadmap, how your product and features are coming together. Let's get a little bit more into that, because that's really the heart of AMP Robotics, is this technology with all this AI and computer vision. I'd love to know a little bit more about your role in developing that.
Yeah, for sure. So my team, the product team, focuses on making sure we're bringing the solutions that our customers need to increase the recovery rate and shift those economics of recycling to be more profitable. So we're constantly having to balance the short-term technology things that we can go build and the long-term. Our primary value in the organization is to collect voice of customer. So across our entire organization, everyone's hearing a little bit of the pieces of the customer experience and the market need and the insight on what's in the future. And so we try to put our arms around all of it and put it into a collective insight on what we need to go do. And then we turn that into the product roadmap. So what are the features and capabilities we need to build into our technology to deliver those outcomes? So often my role is really cross-functional collaboration. Make sure we're all heading towards the same North Star. So on a day-to-day basis, that looks like it's a lot of meetings, but really it's the communication that we need so that we can all stay aligned, all understand what our contribution is to go towards that same North Star.
A lot of the companies or the products that we talk about, most of them spent a good bit of time building that first line of technology before it was released. I'm not quite sure how long AMP Robotics has been around, but do you have a little bit of history about how much effort was put in building and I think patenting some of the technologies before they even decided to release it into production?
Yeah, great question. We've been on about a 7 or 8 year journey now at AMP Robotics. I only joined in March, so there was a great heavy lift by the original team before I even joined the company. And so our CEO and founder, Matanya Horowitz, he got into this because his story is as a child, he was just fascinated by robotics, cartoons like Transformers and and the Jetsons and everything that inspires a young kid to look at the world in that way that I think engineers often approach the world. So he was really interested in how humans become adept at the things that we do. So he went on to get a degree in robotics and while he was pursuing his doctorate at Caltech, he had several research projects with DARPA, so the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. I think that's the right acronym for it, for how to develop better control mechanisms for robotic arms. Humanoid type robots able to perform human-like tasks, specifically in dangerous situations. So taking that back to recycling, these are pretty dangerous situations. You have a lot of material coming down a conveyor belt. It can include things that are not safe for humans. And then there's a lot of kind of organic dust in the air. So this is definitely one of those types of dangerous situations. But while Matanya was in grad school, he was working on more dangerous situations like disabling bombs or entering nuclear power plants. So he got to see through these experiences and through this research what was working really well in robotics and where the remaining opportunity was. And so he also, visionary that he is, saw what computer vision and AI was becoming. So he started looking at, where could this technology be applied? Where is it not being applied today? And it really could be. And that eventually led him to recycling. At first, everyone was like, "Oh, you can't use robots and AI in recycling. It's not going to work.
Can.
It's just not going to work, right?"
Yeah,
exactly.
you can.
Yeah, you can. So recycling was the right fit for a number of reasons, and one of those is because no one else was really working on it. They didn't believe it could happen. So it really was this convergence of the machine learning and the robotics that was like, hey, this together really makes it possible to automate what historically has been a very labor-intensive, high cost, inconsistent, just limited sort of market opportunity. So the challenge of recycling was really appealing because it was such an unmet need, and it fit really well with Matanya's passion for computer vision and robotics. So it took about 7 years to get to where we are, and I would say from my product perspective, it was an interestingly fast adoption for an industry that over, if you zoom back 40 years, hasn't changed that much.
Right.
And so it's all of a sudden this new technology, but I think it's because it met such a need to fill this pain point, this consistent daily pain point of how do we get labor consistently to show up to do the sortation, and how do we do it safely, and how do we recover more from it? And so that's ultimately what led us to where we are.
I'm going to follow up with something you just mentioned, which is the labor, because everybody has this perception that, oh, this means that you've just kicked out a whole bunch of people that really needed a job. And I want to talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, so I think that would be true if it were easy to fill these roles for sortation. But what our customers continually tell us is we can't find people. And so it's not that we're replacing anyone, it's that we're filling a need where no one else can actually show up and fill it.
And this goes back to what you mentioned earlier about the organic dust and maybe some of the hazards. There's just not, okay.
Absolutely. It's not a fun work environment. It's a little bit dirty, it's monotonous. So it's not one of those jobs that people are signing up for. And so especially with the pandemic, that was a really interesting inflection point for AMP. Because all of a sudden you had these labor shortages everywhere, but you still have all this trash that's getting, created. And so you still have waste streams that need to be sorted, and the whole supply chain aspect of this material becomes something else that doesn't go away just because of a pandemic. But all of a sudden you have this waste, it needs to be sorted, and you don't have people on the lines. What do you do? So you're just losing a ton of recoverable value there.
I want to shift now even deeper into the actual technology.
Sure.
So when we talked about earlier in the introduction, I'm going to describe this, for the folks listening. Your trash and everyone else's trash is all mixed together. So she mentioned, you mentioned single stream. So it's all coming together on one conveyor belt. It goes through this conveyor belt, and then at some point it has to be, sorted. Is what you mentioned, sorted. So this computer vision, the cameras, the technology, they're quickly going through and they're making an assessment, visually looking at a product. And even you mentioned even types of plastic. Was that right?
That's right. Yeah.
And then from there, and this is where the robotic arm comes in, quickly picks that up and moves it to wherever it needs to be moved to.
That's right.
So if I'm visually thinking about this, everything's coming down on a conveyor belt. It goes through this kind of bubble, and in the bubble, I've got like this octopus of arms just constantly coming down and picking things up and moving them aside.
Yeah, that's a great image. Yeah, so AI is really our core enabling technology. And so it starts with a vision system on a conveyor belt, RGB. And so we've spent all 7 years really training this AI to be able to understand what are we looking at on the belt. We consider ourselves pretty far along. Our customers often tell us we're the best in the industry at the detection of these materials, but we believe we have lots more runway. We're not going to just settle with where we are. There's so much more that we can do. And so we're going down this belt, you're going under the vision system, we're applying this trained data set to what we're seeing. And then we're picking out based on the customer's preference of what they're trying to sort where in their plant to drive a command to the robotic arm to pick the item, move it to where the customer has specified that material goes. So we can have 4 drop points per robot arm, and they're putting the item in that bunker.
Wow. So it is like an octopus then.
It is, sure.
We'll have to you might have to, like, for branding purposes, come up with like an octopus name or something. I don't know.
I'll talk to our marketing team.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Another thing that's really interesting about computer vision is, in order to train, it's one thing to come up with a set of algorithms, they're mathematical. We can use data to support that, and then we can check and see if our models are accurate. But computer vision is a little bit more, it's like a balance between artistic and data driven, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So can you give us a little bit more of the data sets and the training that went into this? And you also mentioned that there's still more to do, so that would be interesting as well.
Yeah, sure. So we do need samples of material. So anytime we have material running under a belt, we're getting samples. We're able to get those images and then annotate against them. So the really cool thing about AI compared to a human, you can detect faster, you can learn something and then apply it. And you can see this nuance that a human eye can't always take the time to see it and process it as fast as these belts are moving. So things like some materials, especially in the construction and demolition world, to the human eye, they might look the same. They might look like 2 pieces of metal that really look very similar. But if they're bent or they're fractured in any way, that fracture pattern is different. So that's what we're able to train against for AI to get these items to be recognizable. We can see, or we've trained to be able to see specific items as well. So things like brand logos, like a Starbucks cup, or Pepsi. Even some of the rigid cardboard cans, like a Pringles can, we're able to detect those things. So that's what leads our customers to be able to sort more specifically, and that drives up that bale purity so they can command a higher revenue for that bale.
I understand the supply chain up until it gets to the recycling, but you just mentioned command more revenue for the bale. So there's a whole nother supply chain that comes after your company's involved in helping them sort. Is
Absolutely.
That what
Yeah, that's exactly right. So that's where we are part of that supply chain for these commodity items. So it could be, used beverage cans or cardboard or the different types of plastics. Those will go to reclaimers who are turning them into the material that can be used as a raw material in a manufacturing process. So things like plastics that get turned into Trex decking or Patagonia jackets, or downcycled into things like carpets.
So the higher, and my analogy is actually horse farming. I'm sorry, bad analogy, but so I actually used to work on a horse farm. I'm totally going to tie trash to horse now. I used to work on a horse farm, and one of my jobs was to go and work with the guy who's doing the hay fields, so that I could get quality hay for my horses. But what was interesting is I was required to go inspect the hayfield to ensure that it's clean, that there's not a lot of these extra things and weeds, and, so that when he turns around and sells it to me, he's selling it to me at a higher price point, because I validated that the hayfield is truly clean. And I know that when I get the hay bale, it's actually really hay. So now going back from hay to plastics or other products, that's what you're saying here, is that you're able to not only sort and sort with a higher confidence, but sort with a cleaner confidence, which allows your customer to, respectfully ask for a higher price point.
That's exactly right. I've
Yeah.
just learned something about horse farming, but yeah,
I know. I was like, oh my God. As soon as you said that, I'm like, oh my God. I used to do that with when I used to manage a horse farm in college, and 16 horses, 16 acres. That yes,
yeah,
I used to
yeah.
always have to go and inspect hay fields, which was really interesting. But I totally understand what you're saying. So
What a great analogy. Yeah, it's exactly like that. And that's one of the really cool things about AI and the data that we now have captured. We can create reports, we can show what's in a material stream. We just earlier this year released a product that is that vision system with the web BI support of the data of what we're seeing in that vision system. And it helps our customers understand, where am I losing valuable material? And I could do better with my sortation to recover that. What am I actually getting? Where's that additional opportunity? So imagine now, if you didn't have to inspect those hay bales manually, you were able to just, it was running through and it was capturing data and it was telling you what was in it. So that's all the benefits of AI, and just a way that this industry hasn't had the data before to make data-based decisions. They were having to do and manually audit what was in that bale if they felt like, things were questionable and they weren't happy with what was in there.
But if you're the company that's doing the recycling and you're developing a report that gives them opportunities of where to improve, does that come directly back to you on you as the product, the senior director in the product? Isn't that report indirectly coming back to you to say, this is what I need to do to improve?
Sure.
The way you explained it made it sound like, well, that's really all one big cycle here, right?
Sure. Yeah. There's some upstream sortation that happens before you get to robots.
Okay.
So it's some of those upstream things, like, are there some differences that, angle on a screen can make a difference, things like that. But yeah, we do also look at it ourselves. We care a lot about what we call pick success as a metric, because that's really the outcome for the customer. Not only did we see an item and did we go after the item, but we were able to get that item into the bunker and sort it for the customer.
What are some of the other things that, if I ask the question, so this is really cool, but why does this matter? So what? Like, how does this impact me? What would be your response to that?
Yeah, I think sustainability impacts all of us. And we generate so much. I think one of the latest reports from 2019, we're close to 5 pounds per person of trash in the US per day.
Oh, per day.
5 pounds of trash per day per person, right?
Wow.
That's a lot. That's a lot. So there's no way that over time this doesn't impact all of us. So the more we can figure out, how do we avoid landfills? How do we reuse this material? The better, right? Otherwise, it's just going to keep growing.
I like that. Earlier, you mentioned around you have so much more to do.
Yeah.
Can you give us some insight? Can you tell us what it is you're working on?
Yeah. At a high level, of course, we like keeping some stuff company secrets, but
absolutely.
Yeah. So we, as I mentioned, we just released this data portal. So now we're bringing data to an industry that has not historically had it at the sort of granularity that we have. And so some of the way that this can be used is around, well, like, what other opportunity is there? We've also applied our AI for secondary sortation facilities. So everything I've talked about so far is, your curbside collection goes to a place, they sort it once.
Right.
Well, if they aren't able to capture it in that first sort, they're just sending it out the back door to the landfill. They call that residue. So secondary sort, what we're working on now, we've said, hey, there's still good stuff in that residue. It might not be cost effective for you to go after it, but we can go after it with our technology in a way that makes it cost effective and just have one more pass. It's like a buffer between the primary material recovery facility and the landfill, one more pass to try to take out all of that valuable material and keep it from the landfill. So there's a lot more that goes into that, but that's part of where we're going.
I read a lot on the environment, sustainability. There's a lot of the sustainability pledge. You guys are right now focused in the US, correct?
Yeah, we do have some installations in different countries in Europe and Japan. But our primary, since we're a Colorado-based company, our primary market is within the US.
So is one of your options looking at how to bring this value to some of these other other countries that maybe are still just in the early stages of trying to figure out what to do with their recycling and their trash and their landfills, which I think there are other countries from what I've read that are way further in need than say the US. I mean, the US just produces a lot, but it sounds like we have at least an infrastructure to capture that. Some of the other locations outside of the US don't even have the infrastructure at all.
Yeah, that's right. And so there's kind of two sides of it. There's the infrastructure to capture it, and there's the market to take
Okay.
those materials once you capture it. So really it's kind of like chicken or the egg situation.
Okay.
And so that's where when you lower the cost of sortation, you can start to enable some markets that before it just was cost prohibitive to go that way. And I think the more and more climate change sustainability initiatives, it's a global issue. So there really is not, one country where it matters more. I mean, perhaps we generate more waste per day in some of the other countries, but really it's a global issue. And so it's really driving those economics to make sense anywhere you are, because that material is still valuable.
Yeah. You mentioned a minute ago, I always keep saying, oh, you just mentioned this, and I want to talk about that. It's just a plethora of knowledge you are. So you're now pulling data and analytics. Are you
That's
guys
right.
developing, because I know a couple of the people on this call would be interested, are you guys developing your own like chief data office and chief analytics office? Is that something that you currently have people doing right now, but if you keep doing this, you're probably going to have to grow into that kind of formal roles?
That's a really great question. So I think right now our focus around the data is really how do we get the accuracy and the breadth of the data to really be just really good at seeing it. I like to summarize it into you have to see it, to sort it, to report it, and it has to go in that order. Thank you. I think I should print it on a t-shirt and make it like my
It'll be the new
tagline.
AMP Robotics. See it?
See it,
Yeah, I love
sort
it.
it, report it. Yeah. So a lot of what we're focusing now is on how do we make sure that we're seeing, with accuracy. All AI comes with some inherent, we've got to get the accuracy right. The breadth of the labels. So in different markets, some things matter more than others. For example, you mentioned glass earlier. Maybe you can just say it's glass, but in some markets you have to say it's green glass or brown glass, and that really matters.
Yeah, my market won't do glass at all.
Yeah,
I'm very bummed by that. Yeah.
Well, that's usually because the glass will break down and start rubbing on the belts, and it causes equipment failure just because it's, that gritty sort of thing. So it's usually just because they don't have a great way of processing it.
I will now not argue with my trash people anymore. I think you've just answered a question that we've all been wanting to know. Why did they suddenly just stop recycling glass for no reason? I just feel so bad that I'm throwing this glass jar into the trash can, but I get it now. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Our challenges. Yes.
You might want to look into, are there other places that you can bring the glass, or is there a way that you could reuse the glass? That might be some other things for you to consider.
I like that. I did. Okay. Totally off topic, but someone did just mention that they're starting to use their old glass containers as their mugs and cups for dishes.
Yeah, perfect.
I was like, okay, that's good. Someone else said a planter. So I'm like, okay, so I'm starting to get some really good ideas, but thank you for helping address the answer of why. It just, because it was there for a long time and then it just stopped.
Yep. And it just all depends on the facility, the way they're set up, and does that mess up their operations or not? And is there a market in that area for it?
So I totally interrupted you earlier.
Oh, no, it's okay. What were we talking about?
Well, you were going to do a t-shirt that said, no, we were talking about the CDO office and the collection of all this data.
Yeah. So really focusing on, we've got to be able to see it. We've got to be able to sort it for our customers, and the reporting part, all that data that we're collecting. Right now, we really want to help our customers use that data in a way to make their operations better and to make their bottom line better. And that is really the heart of our focus right now. But if you start to look at what's going on across the world, the US is starting to adopt some things that are already existing in Europe with what's called extended producer responsibility, or EPR. And so that's a way of being able to say, well, all this waste that's generated from new products, is that getting recaptured? How much should the producer be responsible for that? And how do we start to measure that? So that's kind of where the industry is going, which historically has really relied on manual audits to be able to capture that information. Well, now we've got this AI vision system and the ability to capture more automatically.
Just a couple questions to wrap up before we end today, but are you seeing with the infusion of AI, because you've got AI, you've got machine learning, you're using deep learning, you're using computer vision, probably a little bit of neural networks
Absolutely.
as well. So that's a lot going on. Are you starting to find that as this becomes more and more acceptable within the industry, that maybe there might be some agency policies and regulations that are following? You're seeing that, yes?
Yeah. Absolutely. And we want to help guide that, where we have that knowledge and that data to help make more data-based decisions to drive towards an outcome. It's one thing to talk about, government policy at a high level, but that doesn't always equate to the actual outcomes that you want to create. And so that data that we're collecting, and we're at that table and we're having those conversations.
So we're still in the early stages then. And now that we're collecting the data, then that data can be used to help refine, or what you said, you want to be part of the conversation to guide what some of those regulations should be looking like in the future.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, we're gonna have to come talk to you in about a year from now and see how you've impacted those regulations.
Let's do a checkup in a year.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are wrapping up. I know this time has gone by really quickly. It's probably the fastest one I've ever felt like I've done. Do you have any insights, lessons learned, leave behinds for maybe women who maybe weren't thinking about trash and recycling, that you can help them understand how exciting this really was?
Yeah, for sure. Insights about trash. So, for AMP, one of our lessons learned was when people say it won't work there, don't listen. Yeah, these are tough environments. And yeah, we had to go through figuring out how to apply this technology to this tough environment, but stick with it. If you really believe it's there, stick with it. I think another lesson learned for AMP and for me, as I've gone through my journey at AMP, is that recycling is more than an environmental do-good. It really is a part of a global supply chain. And I think we're all realizing how important global supply chain is these days.
Yeah.
And the ability to have a positive impact on people's health by, being able to put robots in places that are not so great for people. For my own career, I've been very fortunate to have so many mentors, and they've given me little tidbits of advice here and there. And so here's a couple of things that have stuck with me that I thought if it helps you, then please take it. So the first is measure your success by your own definition of success. What's right for someone else might not be right for you. But when you do find what's right for you, everything clicks. The second one is, as a female raised in the South, and maybe I saw that you went to Auburn, so maybe this will resonate with you. This one was particularly helpful. I'm a collaborative sort of person, so I used to always ask, does that make sense? And I had a manager tell me once, it comes across as me questioning my own ability to communicate rather than checking in with people as I intended it to. So some small language changes, like, are there any questions, gives that same opportunity for feedback, but without that hidden message of, maybe I don't know what I'm saying right now. So that one definitely stuck with me.
I like that.
Yeah. And then the third and last one I'll leave you with is, I once was told, leaders don't ask for a seat at the table. They show up early, they take a seat because they know they have something to contribute.
I love all of those. Oh my God, I love all of those.
That's why they stuck with me.
Yeah, those are great. Oh my gosh, absolutely. Yeah. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much. I know we're kind of in the middle of your day today, but thank you so much for taking the time. I was really excited about this before. I'm even more excited about talking to you now. I look forward to really I truly think we definitely need to follow up and understand how you've been able to impact those regulations, and then talk a little bit more about that secondary phase that you guys are working on, because ultimately you just mentioned it. You're part of a much larger global supply chain that I didn't even fully, realize.
Yeah, well, we'd love to follow up. Thank you so much for the time, and please recycle your plastics and your cans.
Excellent. Excellent. Thanks.
Thanks.